Kurdistan is about the size of West Virginia. The land is rich in natural resources. Oil and water are both abundant. There are about 3.5 million people living here. The Kurds themselves are racially distinct from Arabs. They have a singular heritage and language. In fact, they're a nation in every way except one. They have no country of their own. The Turks, the Iranians, and the Syrians vehemently oppose a Kurdish homeland, even though the Kurds have been promised one repeatedly over the last century. Iran and Turkey recently had high-level meetings to deal with what they see as the unacceptable possibility of Kurdish independence. For their part, the Iraqi Kurds say, although that's the dream, for now they'd settle for being an autonomous part of a democratic federal Iraq.
After the change, the rights of the Kurdish nation must be preserved, so our future is no worse than the present.
This is not an easy place to get to. In fact, Syria is the only neighbor that has not completely isolated the Iraqi Kurds. In a humanitarian gesture, the Syrians established a quasi-official checkpoint at the Tigris River, where a limited number of people may cross the border via motorboat, as we did. It's a land of contradictions. In just 11 years, they built an astoundingly modern and developed society after having been decimated by Saddam's forces. But all this exists only because the U.S. and British warplanes continued to protect them. They have thousands of miles of paved highways, supermarkets stocked with expensive foreign goods, a television network with multiple language newscasts. Even with the threat of Iraqi reprisals hanging over their heads, the Kurds still call this their golden age. The first time in their history where they've been allowed to truly thrive. And thriving they are. This is an amusement park in the city of Duhok. The name, Dream City, is not intended to be ironic. Another contradiction, they've established a pluralistic democracy that protects minorities, even though they're officially part of a country that denies their rights, including the right to exist. Although predominantly a Muslim people, their Christian minority worships openly. All this may seem like the hallmark of an independent nation, but it's not. The Kurds are completely dependent economically on two very antagonistic neighbors. The Turks, who won't allow free flow of people or goods across their border, but they're more than happy to welcome smuggled Iraqi oil. The Kurds levy attacks on these tankers that pass through their territory. And in the biggest contradiction of all, the Kurds are most dependent financially on Saddam Hussein. The UN administers the Food for Oil program it imposed on the Iraqi dictator, through which Kurdistan receives roughly 13% of Iraq's total oil revenues. But the program's designers gave veto power over how the money gets used to Saddam. In fact, the Kurds have no other source of food or medicine. And if those supplies are disrupted by another war,
it would shake the society to its foundation. Because now the society depends on this program.
They have only 2 weeks of food stockpiled. But starvation isn't their main concern. This side of the Zab River is Kurdistan. The other side of the Zab River and the other side of that military checkpoint is also Kurdistan. The difference is that part of Kurdistan is still controlled by Saddam Hussein. His troops, his tanks, and many here fear his chemical or biological weapon-laden missiles are mere moments away in the event of war. The Kurds are convinced that even though Saddam would be in the fight of his life against the American forces and their allies, he would still lash out at them out of his hatred for the Kurds. They have good reason to believe that. He's done it before. Kurds have been persecuted by Saddam Hussein for decades under a murderous campaign known as Al-Anfar. In 1988, Saddam's forces shocked the world by using chemical weapons against his own people in the Kurdish city of Halabja. Some intelligence sources suspect the Iraqis were testing their new weapons. The Kurds say as many as 5,000 people were killed. Today, families in villages like Shoresh, within sight of Iraqi military outposts, live under the shadow of fear that they too could fall victim to chemical weapons. Shilin Hamid Abdullah says they most often shoot at night.
We want the Iraqi government to take them away, but more soldiers are coming to the front. And it is very hard for us to be so close, because we know that they are our enemies.
And in the nearby primary school, the students learned their Kurdish language, history of their region, and how to avoid stepping on the estimated 8 million landmines that dot the no man's land between their part of Iraq and Saddam's. Without heavy weapons, the Kurds know they're no match for Iraqi tanks. There's a saying here, you can't kill a stone with an egg. But they say they have two advantages, their land and their friends.
We have mountains. We are sure we will defend, but for sure they are stronger than us.
At the past, we were telling ourselves that we have only mountains as our friends. Now we have a lot of mountains all over the world, from United States to Japan to New Zealand. That means that we are no more alone. And I think we can survive and we can reach our goals.
The mountains aren't going anywhere. The friends? Well, their friends haven't always been so reliable. The Kurds wonder, as drums of war are beginning to sound yet again, if this time will be different.